A villa on one of Dubai's man-made islands recently sold for 220 million dirhams. That is close to $60 million, logged in the Dubai Land Department's own records. A woman who bought into the same coastline 20 years ago told a reporter something else. She and her husband had already lost their home in Britain because they could not keep up with the mortgage. The Dubai villa was going to be their pension. But it was never built, and 20 years later, she was offered her money back on a project the government had already canceled. The villa is on Amali Island, part of the world, the artificial archipelago shaped like a map of the planet sitting about 4 kilometers off the Jumeirah coastline. It covers roughly 58,000 square feet. The sale price works out to about 3,787 dirhams per square foot. And it is not an outlier. In 2024, Dubai recorded 435 home sales above $10 million, more than any other city on Earth. Across 2025, the emirate logged 6,668 luxury property transactions worth about 143.8 billion dirhams, which is close to $39 billion. So the land is working. The islands are selling. Hotels are opening on them right now. That is the part almost nobody says out loud, because the story everyone has heard about these islands is the opposite one. Here is what actually happened, in order. In May 2003, the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, unveiled a plan to build a miniature world in the Persian Gulf. Roughly 300 separate islands, arranged into the shape of the continents, 4 to 6 kilometers offshore. Dredging started 4 months later. The actual construction was done by 2 Dutch marine engineering firms, Van Oord and Boskalis, the same companies that had built Palm Jumeirah. They pulled sand off the seabed and dropped it inside a ring of rock. Each island came out somewhere between 250,000 and 900,000 square feet. The total cost was around 50 billion dirhams, call it $13.5 billion, for sand. Nakheel, the state-linked developer running it, sold islands rather than apartments. You bought a piece of the map, and what you built on it was your problem. That model is unusual, and it is why the buyer list looked the way it did. This was a product for people who wanted to own a country in miniature, and who had enough money that the absence of a house on it was a detail to be solved later. Nobody was buying an island to live on, which also meant the developer collected its money at the front. The islands were sold as land. The obligation to make that land habitable, to connect it, service it, and give it a reason to exist, was the part that came afterward. The marketing was extraordinary. Richard Branson and Karl Lagerfeld were flown out to look at them. Greenland went to the ruler himself. That was the world. But down the coast, the same developer was shaping a second island, Palm Jebel Ali, and selling something completely different on it. Not islands, villas, to people who intended to live in them. Those are the buyers who matter in this story. Clegg, who was living in London at the time, walked past a scale model of Palm Jebel Ali in Wafi Mall in Dubai in 2003. He was sold on it. He put in 1.7 million dirhams from the sale of his apartment in London toward a 5-bedroom villa priced at 5.7 million dirhams, spread over 7,000 square feet. A 10% deposit in 2004, then a 20% advance in October 2008 when Nakheel said construction was restarting. He expected to move in by 2012. In his own words, he needed a home to live in. Hold on to Clegg. Everything that happens next happens to him. Back out on the world, by 2008 the protective breakwater around the whole archipelago was finished, and Nakheel had sold roughly 70% of the islands. Then everything stopped at once. The 2008 financial crisis hit Dubai harder than almost anywhere. Nearly half of all projects in the emirate were canceled or delayed. Property prices fell by around 60%. In 2009, Nakheel had to be pulled out of a $25 billion debt hole through a government-backed restructuring that took until 2011 to complete. Construction on the world went to nearly zero. If you were not watching Dubai in those years, it is hard to convey how completely the machine seized. Cranes stopped mid-lift. Contractors demobilized and flew home. Half-finished towers stood open to the weather for years. Expatriate workers left the country, in some cases abandoning financed cars at the airport, because debt default in the UAE could mean a criminal charge rather than a bankruptcy filing. The emirate recovered eventually, and completely, but it took years to get there, and the buyers on these islands spent every one of those years holding paper. And this is where the timeline starts costing people real money, though almost none of them understood that yet. Because the islands themselves were finished. The sand was in place. The rock was in place. What never arrived was everything above the waterline. For years, the archipelago was 300 blank sandbars in the Gulf, visible from space, with title deeds attached to most of them. There was no realistic way to sell one either. A resale market needs comparable transactions, and there were almost none. Nobody could tell you what an undeveloped island was worth, because nobody was buying undeveloped islands. An owner who wanted out had to find a private buyer willing to take on the same waiting game at a price both sides were guessing at. By 2016, 13 years after the project was announced, only 9 of the roughly 300 islands had been developed at all. The continents of Africa, Asia, Australia, and South America were empty sand. 9 out of 300, 13 years in. At that rate, the archipelago would finish sometime in the 2400s. Picture what that means if you are one of the buyers. You own an island. You can point to it on a satellite image. There is no bridge to it, no water line, no power, no road, and no neighbors. Getting to it means a boat. That single fact is the difference between this project and the one that worked. Palm Jumeirah, the first of Dubai's Palm Islands, is connected to the mainland by road. You can drive onto it. Utilities run under that road. Construction trucks use it. Residents commute on it. It filled up, and it is now one of the most expensive addresses in the Middle East. The world has no road. It never did. Even today, the islands are reachable only by boat or by air, which means every bag of cement, every worker, every water pipe, and every guest has to cross open water to get there. On a project with momentum, that is an inconvenience. On a project that has stalled, it is a wall. No single island owner can build a bridge to a private island 4 kilometers offshore. The infrastructure had to come from the developer, and the developer had just been pulled out of a $25 billion debt hole. Meanwhile, something else was happening offshore, and it turned into the story that stuck to this project for the next 15 years. In 2010, a company called Penguin Marine, which held the rights to ferry people out to the islands, went to court against Nakheel. Penguin wanted out of its contract. Its barrister told the court the islands were gradually falling back into the sea and described signs of erosion and deterioration. The sand, the argument went, was returning to the seabed it came from, and the channels between the islands were silting up. That line went around the world. It is still the first thing anyone repeats about the world. Nakheel's answer was flat. The company called the reports wholly inaccurate. It said the whole project sits on a plateau of rock, that the islands were designed to last for hundreds of years, and that the islands are not going anywhere. It conceded only that sand had shifted on some beach areas, which it said could give a false impression of movement. A separate 2009 survey by the ground survey firm Fugro measured subsidence on the Palm Islands at about 5 millimeters a year. Nakheel and the Dubai government rejected that reading too. Before you decide who to believe, go back to who was speaking. Penguin Marine held exclusive marine transport rights to an archipelago that almost nobody lived on, worked on, or visited. Exclusive access to nothing is not an asset. It is an obligation with a fee attached. The company was not in that courtroom to warn the public about coastal engineering. It was there to get out of a contract that had stopped being worth holding. That does not make the claim false. Courts hear true things from motivated parties every day, but it is the context that vanished the moment the quote went online, and it is the reason the most repeated fact about these islands came from a witness with a reason to say it. And here is the part the viral version leaves out. Nakheel won the case, which left the buyers on the world in a stranger position than the ones on Palm Jebel Ali. There was no cancellation for them, no formal refund program, no settlement formula. Their islands still existed, still belonged to them, and still had nothing on them. They were not owed anything because nothing had legally gone wrong. They owned sand, indefinitely, in the middle of the sea. Because the islands never sinking is exactly what made the wait so expensive for the people holding them. If the land had genuinely dissolved, there would have been a claim, an insurer, a loss to argue about. Instead, the sand sat there, intact, holding its shape, doing nothing, while Dubai property values recovered and then exploded around it. The clearest version of this is on the island next door. Palm Jebel Ali was launched in 2002 as the follow-up to Palm Jumeirah. It covers 13.4 square kilometers, roughly twice the size of the original Palm, with enough planned housing for around 35,000 families. The land reclamation was substantially finished by 2007. 5- and 6-bedroom villas there sold for around 16 million dirhams at the peak, about $4.35 million. Then the work stopped in mid-2008, and the island sat as a shape on a satellite photo for more than 15 years. In 2011, Nakheel started offering refunds. Buyers could take their money back or swap it into another Nakheel project. Some did. A Nakheel executive later summed it up like this. They had offered people the chance to shift over to Palm Jumeirah, which was finished. Many took it, and the price tripled after they moved. Others swapped into different properties. And then, he said, some people just want to wait. What can I do? If you are getting something out of this, hit subscribe. I cover engineering failures and the dark side of luxury real estate every week. Now, the people who waited and why they waited. The people who waited had reasons. One of them was the woman this video opened with. Chater was down for a villa of around 3,800 square feet. She had found the project in the British press, and a friend had bought in too. By the time she spoke publicly, she had already lost her house in the United Kingdom because she could not keep up with the mortgage. The Dubai villa, she said, was going to be their pension plan. Rakesh Kumar Singh, a London-based GP, had paid £400,000 toward his. None of them wanted a check. They wanted the thing they had bought. Chater asked only that Nakheel honor the original contract. The negotiations dragged on for over a decade. In November 2021, a letter signed by 74 investors went directly to the office of the ruler of Dubai. Around 700 buyers said they were unhappy with the offer of alternative properties and were preparing to hire lawyers. They had already paid the developer between 30% and 50% of their purchase prices, and they asked Nakheel to reopen its transfer desk so they could at least sell their positions on the open market. 2 years later, the project was canceled instead. Then in 2023, the Dubai Land Department formally canceled the original Palm Jebel Ali. The version those people had bought into no longer legally existed. That sentence is doing more work than it looks like. When a Dubai regulator cancels a project, it is a legal event that changes what a buyer owns. Before cancellation, you hold a claim on a property, a specific villa on a specific plot, at the price fixed in your contract. After cancellation, that property is gone as a legal object, and what you hold instead is a claim on money. In one administrative step, every original buyer stopped owning Dubai real estate and started owning a receipt. On May 31, 2023, Nakheel relaunched it under a new master plan. Now look at the terms the original buyers were offered, because this is the whole video. Option 1. Take a full refund. You get back the money you paid Nakheel. No interest on it. No adjustment for 20 years of inflation. No share of what the land became. Remember what Clegg said about that. Having waited so long, they were not looking for a refund. They were looking to have their villas built and their contracts honored. Option 2. Do not take the cash. Convert it into a credit note worth 1.5 times your original investment and spend it inside the relaunched project. That second option sounds generous until you check what it buys. Villas on the relaunched Palm Jebel Ali started from 18 million dirhams, against the 16 million those buyers paid at the peak. So a buyer's 16 million dirhams, multiplied by 1.5, comes to 24 million dirhams of credit against a new villa starting at 18 million. After 2 decades of waiting, that buys roughly one villa and change in a market where the entry price had already moved past where they came in. And notice what the 1.5 multiplier is actually admitting. Nakheel did not offer that number out of generosity. It offered it because land values had risen so far that a straight refund would not buy back anything close to what the buyer had originally contracted for. The multiplier is the developer's own estimate of how much value those buyers missed. It is compensation calculated by the party that owed it, on terms set by the party that owed it, redeemable only inside the project that had already kept them waiting for 15 years. And there is a third detail that decides who actually gets hurt. Nakheel stated that settlements would be based on the full amounts Nakheel itself received, not the prices buyers paid to third parties. Read that again. If you bought your unit directly from the developer in 2005, you get back what you paid. If you bought it in 2007 from somebody else, at the marked up price the secondary market was charging at the top of the boom, you do not get what you paid. You get what the developer originally banked. The people who bought at the peak, from a reseller, took a loss that was written into the refund formula itself. A property research site reviewing the situation in 2026 put it in one line. Nakheel is under pressure to buy out the investors still holding on, offering to refund money paid and nothing else, 20 years later. Now put that next to what the same water is worth today. The world islands are in the middle of a genuine revival. A resort is open and running. The heart of Europe, 6 themed islands built by the Kleindienst Group for around $5 billion, is roughly 52% complete and due to finish in 2027. Private island plots out there now start above 30 million dirhams. And on Palm Jebel Ali, the island Clegg and Chater bought into, a single plot on the tip of one frond sold for 43 million dirhams. In April 2026, Nakheel signed 3.5 billion dirhams of villa contracts there, and the first handovers are scheduled before the end of this year. And that Amali Island villa went for 220 million dirhams. Even now, only about 10 to 15% of the 300 islands are developed or under active construction. The rest is still bare sand, which is the whole reason the prices look the way they do. There will never be a second world. Dubai is not dredging another 300 islands, and the ones that exist are finite, mapped, and mostly spoken for. Which means the scarcity is real, and the value is climbing on the exact land those original buyers were persuaded to hand back. So here is where it leaves them. Nobody lost an island to the sea. That was the story. It went everywhere, and a court found against it. What actually happened is slower and harder to photograph. The sand stayed exactly where it was put for 20 years, doing nothing, while the people who paid for it ran out of time. They put money into the Gulf in 2005, watched an entire property cycle run without them, had their contract legally canceled underneath them in 2023, and were handed back a number that had stopped meaning what it meant when they wrote the check. And nobody involved will ever be found guilty of anything. Nakheel refunded people in full and offered a multiplier on top. The government canceled a project that had stopped existing. On paper, the file closes clean. But go back to what these buyers actually asked for, every time they were asked. Clegg wanted the villa he had sold his London apartment to buy. Chater wanted the contract honored. Singh wanted the £400,000 he had already paid to turn into a building. Not one of them asked for their money back. That was the only thing on offer. They were handed a check for the exact sum they paid in 2005 and told the matter was settled, while the sand they had paid for was being sold to somebody else for 43 million dirhams a plot. In a market that moved this far, a refund is just a slower way of losing. Next, the mega project that swallowed $500 billion and then stopped being built.